Matthew chapter 24, continued. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Matthew 24:17. The housetop in Palestine corresponds to our front porch or our patio. Again, let me emphasize the fact that our Lord is speaking to the folk in Palestine, not to you and me. This warning is not applicable to us. We don't spend our time on our housetops. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. Matthew 24:18. This refers to people engaged in agriculture. If a worker in the fields leaves his cloak at the end of the row in the early morning when it is cool, and the word comes that the abomination of desolation has appeared, he is not to go back and get his cloak, but he is to start running. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. Matthew 24:19. This reveals his great care and concern for mothers and little children. It will be a time when one should not have children. It is believed that there will be a great population explosion at the beginning of the Great Tribulation. The fact that this earth is becoming overweighted with people in our day may be another evidence that we are approaching the end of the age. But pray ye that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. Matthew 24:20. Again, these are people who are observing the Sabbath day, which is Saturday. This is another proof that Christ is speaking directly to the Jewish people. I don't go to church on the Sabbath but on Sunday because my Lord rose from the dead on that day. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. Matthew 24:21. For then shall be great tribulation. In Revelation 7:14 the literal translation is the tribulation, the great one, placing the article before both the noun and the adjective for emphasis. In other words, this tribulation is unique. There has been nothing like it in the history of the world, and there will never again be anything like it. And notice that our Lord is the one who labels the end of the age as the Great Tribulation. If you want to find fault with it, talk to him, not to me. Such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. Since that is true, believe me, people will know it when it gets here. I hear people today talking about the church going through the tribulation, and they don't seem to realize how severe it will be. In fact, some folks say that we are in the Great Tribulation at the present time. Well, things are bad in our day, I'll grant that, but this period can be matched with many other periods in history. When the Great Tribulation gets here, there will be nothing to match it in the past or in the future. And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake those days shall be shortened. Matthew 24:22. We read in the book of Revelation that during the tribulation 1/3 of the population of the earth will be destroyed. On another occasion 1/4 of the population will be destroyed. It is absolutely unique. Using the simile given to us in Revelation 6, the red horse of war, the black horse of famine, and then the pale horse of death will ride during that period, and the population of the earth will be decimated. There was a time when this seemed to be an exaggeration. Even some good commentators considered it hyperbole. However, now that several nations of the world have atom bombs, which could destroy the population of the world, it no longer appears to be exaggerated. However, there is comfort in this verse, but for the elect's sake those days shall be shortened. God will not let mankind commit suicide. That is the reason this will be such a brief period. Jesus assures them concerning his coming again. Now we come to what will be the sign of his coming. Then if any man shall say unto you, Lo, here is Christ, or there, believe it not. For there shall arise false Christs, and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that, if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. Behold, I have told you before. Matthew 24:23-25. Don't miss what he is saying here. The ability to work miracles in our day should be looked upon with suspicion because the next great miracle worker will not be Christ, he will be Antichrist with his false prophets. If it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. Who are the elect? In the scriptures there are two elect groups, the elect of the nation Israel and the elect of the church. We have to use common sense to determine which group is meant. Who has our Lord been talking about up to this point? Israel. Alright, Israel is the elect in this verse, also. Jesus is not talking about the church. You can fool some of the people some of the time. You can fool all of the people some of the time. But you cannot fool God's children all of the time. It just can't be done. I have read many letters which testify of this. A recent letter is from a woman who has come out of a religious cult. She listened to our Bible teaching radio program for months before she could see the error of the cult's teaching. It isn't possible to fool God's children all the time. They will come out of a cult eventually. Wherefore if they shall say unto you, Behold, he is in the desert, go not forth, behold, he is in the secret chambers, believe it not. For as the lightning cometh out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Matthew 24:26-27. When he comes, there will not be any John the Baptist to announce him. But when he comes, the whole world will know, and it will be as public as lightning. Those of you that live in the Midwest know that a lightning storm is a public affair. When it comes, everybody knows about it, and sometimes it is a frightful experience. The Lord's second coming to the earth will be like that. No one will need to announce it. When our Lord comes the second time to establish his kingdom on earth, everyone will know he is coming. Remember that his second coming to earth does not refer to the rapture. For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. Matthew 24:28. This is the most difficult verse to understand in the entire Olivet Discourse. After speaking of his coming in glory like lightning out of heaven, then to speak of carrion-eating birds seems strange indeed, but I believe it refers to Christ's coming in judgment, because Revelation 19 tells us about an invitation that went out to the birds to come together for a great banquet. And I saw an angel standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the fowls that fly in the midst of heaven, Come and gather yourselves together unto the supper of the great God, that ye may eat the flesh of kings, and the flesh of captains, and the flesh of mighty men, and the flesh of horses, and of them that sit on them, and the flesh of all men, both free and bond, both small and great. And I saw the beast, and the kings of the earth, and their armies, gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse, and against his army. Revelation 19:17-19. The birds that feed on carrion seem to be agents of divine judgment. When the Lord comes again, he will come in judgment. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. Matthew 24:29. Notice that this is to be immediately after the tribulation of those days. It is my understanding that all of these things will take place at Christ's second coming to the earth. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Matthew 24:30. Then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. What is that sign? Again I will have to speculate. Back in the Old Testament, you remember, the nation Israel was given the glory, the Shekinah presence of God. No other nation or people has ever had that, nor does the church have it. The Shekinah glory rested over the tabernacle and later the temple at Jerusalem. But because of Israel's sin, the Shekinah glory left the nation. When Christ came the first time, he laid aside, not his deity, but his prerogative of deity, his glory, although John says, we beheld his glory. John 1:14, because there were times when it broke through. However, at his second coming, I believe that the Shekinah glory will hover over the earth before he breaks through, and it will be the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. They shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. This is his return to earth to set up his kingdom. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Matthew 24:31. The elect spoken of in this verse is still the nation Israel. The prophets in the Old Testament foretold of a miracle that would bring the Jews back into their land. This is not the church which is going to be caught up out of this world to meet the Lord in the air. Angels are not connected with the rapture. The Lord will come in person to receive the church with the sound of a trumpet, and his voice will be like that of an archangel. He will not need any help to gather his church together. He died for the church, and he will bring it together. When he says that the angels shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other, we can be sure that he is talking about the nation Israel. Ministering angels have always been connected with Israel. The parable of the fig tree is a sign. Now learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender, and putteth forth leaves, ye know that summer is nigh. So likewise ye, when ye shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. Matthew 24:32-33. I do not see how the fig tree could represent anything other than the nation Israel. For example, see Jeremiah 24, Hosea 9:10. There are certainly fig trees growing in abundance in Israel even in our day after all that has happened to that land. I was impressed with the fig orchards north of Jerusalem and the vineyards south of Jerusalem. The area south of Bethlehem is filled with vineyards. Fig trees and grapevines identify the land, and I believe that our Lord is using the fig tree as a symbol of that land. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass, till all these things be fulfilled. Matthew 24:34. This generation, the Greek word can mean race and refer to the nation Israel. Or it could refer to the generation that will be living at the time these predictions come to pass. A generation is reckoned to be about 20 years, and certainly the predicted events of this section will take place in a much briefer time than 20 years. My feeling is that it could refer to either one, but I much prefer the interpretation that it refers to the preservation of the Jewish race. Haman was not able to destroy them, neither was Pharaoh, nor did Hitler succeed in his attempts. And no dictator in our day will be able to exterminate these people. God will see to that. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. Matthew 24:35. He says, you can just underscore what I've said, because heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not. Heaven and earth will pass away, there will be a new heaven and a new earth, see Revelation 21:1, but he will not change his word. It will stand throughout the eternal ages. But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. Matthew 24:36. Although they will know that this period is drawing near, they will not know the day nor the hour. Since there have been so many folk in our day who have tried to pinpoint the time of Christ's return, I'm of the opinion that in that future day there will be some folk who will try to figure it down to the very hour. But no one will know either the day or the hour. And he will use the illustration of Noah. But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Matthew 24:37. Christ will come in a day which will be like the days of Noah. For as in the days that were before the flood they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came, and took them all away, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Matthew 24:38-39. Now, the days of Noah were characterized by gross immorality. Every thought and imagination of man's heart was only evil continually. See Genesis 6:5. But our Lord says that his coming will be in days like the days of Noah, and he mentions only that they were eating and drinking. Is there anything wrong with eating and drinking? No, we are told that whatever we do, whether we eat or drink, or whatsoever we do, we are to do all to the glory of God. See 1 Corinthians 10:31. However, the people in Noah's day were not eating and drinking to the glory of God. In fact, they were living as though God did not exist. A little boy was invited out to dinner for the first time in his life. He was just going next door, but to him it was a big event. So when the time came to go, he made a beeline for the house next door. When they sat down to the table to eat, the boy automatically bowed his head to offer thanks for the food because he came from a Christian home. Suddenly he realized he was the only one who had his head down and the rest of the folks were passing food back and forth. He opened his eyes and, not having any inhibitions, said, "Don't you thank God for your food?" There was embarrassing silence for a moment, and then the lady of the house said, "No, we don't." The little fellow thought for a moment and then said, "You're like my dogs, they just start right in." In our day there are multitudes of people who receive a meal that comes from the hand of God 3 times a day while millions of people are starving to death, and they never think of thanking God. And in that future day, they will be right on the verge of the coming of Christ, and they will be living as though it will never take place. Also, the people of Noah's day were marrying and giving in marriage. Certainly our Lord is not saying that marriage is wrong. His point is that they rejected so completely God's warning through Noah that they went ahead and had their weddings, maybe even church weddings, right up to the day that Noah entered into the ark. They lived as though God did not exist. They did not believe that he would judge them and scorned the warning that a flood was imminent. And knew not until the flood came, and took them all away, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Then shall 2 be in the field, the one shall be taken, and the other left. 2 women shall be grinding at the mill, the one shall be taken, and the other left. Matthew 24:40-41. I can hear someone saying to me, "Well, preacher, you have finally painted yourself into a corner. You said the church and the rapture are not in the Olivet Discourse, but here they are. 2 shall be in the field, one shall be taken, and the other shall be left." Well, my friend, he still is not talking about the rapture. After all, what is our Lord talking about here? As the days of Noah were. Who was taken away in the days of Noah? They knew not until the flood came, and took them all away. They perished in the flood. This is not referring to the rapture when the church will be taken out of the world. Rather, this pictures the removing from the earth by judgment those who are not going to enter the millennial kingdom. Watch therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord doth come. Matthew 24:42. Watch is the important word, and it has a little different meaning from the watching that the child of God does now in waiting for the rapture. Today we have a comforting hope. In that future day it will be watching with fear and anxiety. In the night they will say, would to God it were morning, and in the morning they will say, would to God it were evening. Today we are to wait and long for his coming. In that future day they will watch with anxiety for his return. You may think that I am splitting hairs, but I'm not. I looked up the Greek word for watch and found that it had about 8 different meanings. Although in English we have only the one word, it has several different meanings, also. Let me illustrate this by a man who goes deer hunting. Every year this man goes into the woods to about the same spot. He puts up camp, and early in the morning he goes over the hogback on the hill and sits down by the trunk of an old tree and waits. After a while he hears a noise in the brush and thinks it might be a deer. He lifts his rifle and waits. He is watching for a deer. 2 weeks later you meet this same man down on the main street corner of town, and you see that he is looking intently down the street. You know that he is waiting for someone. You walk up to him and say, "Who are you watching for?" He replies, "I'm waiting for my wife, she is 45 minutes late." He is watching for a deer again, but it is a different deer and he is watching in a little different way. Before, on the hill, he had his deer gun with him, and he sort of wishes he had it with him again, but it is against the law for him to shoot her. But he is watching, and watching in a different way, you see. A month or 2 later you go to the hospital and you pass a room and see this man and his wife sitting by the bedside of a little child. The child has a burning fever, and the doctor has told them that the crisis will come about midnight. They are watching. My friend, that is a different type of watching than watching for a deer or waiting for a wife on the corner. This is watching with anxiety. And I think it will be somewhat with the same feeling that they will watch for our Lord's second coming. But know this, that if the goodman of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched, and would not have suffered his house to be broken up. Therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not the Son of Man cometh. Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord hath made ruler over his household, to give them meat in due season. Matthew 24:43-45. What our Lord is doing in the remainder of the Olivet Discourse is giving parables to illustrate the attitude of folk to his coming and what will happen when he does come. Blessed is that servant, whom his Lord when he cometh shall find so doing. Verily I say unto you, that he shall make him ruler over all his goods. But and if that evil servant shall say in his heart, My Lord delayeth his coming, and shall begin to smite his fellow servants, and to eat and drink with the drunken, the Lord of that servant shall come in a day when he looketh not for him, and in an hour that he is not aware of, and shall cut him asunder, and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Matthew 24:46-51. This parable reflects the attitude of some folk in that future day. They shall say, well, the Lord delays his coming, so I'll just go on living carelessly. When Christ returns, he will judge that man. This is a great principle which is applicable to every age. You and I ought to live our lives in the light of the fact that we are to stand in the presence of Christ. Note that I didn't say in the light of the coming of Christ but in the light of the presence of Christ. Regardless of whether Christ comes 100 years from today or 1,000 years, you and I will stand in his presence. Whether you are saved or lost, you will stand in his presence. If you are saved, you will have to give him an account of your life to see if you receive a reward. If you are lost, you will stand there to be judged. Therefore, every person should live his life in light of the fact that he is to stand in the presence of the Lord. This is the great emphasis in the Olivet Discourse. Therefore, it has applications to us, although the interpretation is specifically to folk living at the time of Christ's return as King.